Cool. So thanks very much for coming along this afternoon. What we're going to do is we're going to follow a bit of I guess, a slide deck to start with to set some context, and then we're going to jump into demo land. And of course, at any time you've got questions, feel free to answer them using the questions interface in the webinar sort of view there. And I've got a question here from you, David. It's about the Gmail integration. If you like, we might cover that in about 5 minutes' time. So we'll get around to that very soon. Okay, so first of all, thanks very much for coming along. What I'm hoping to do today is spend a little bit of time, if you like, at a high level, covering AffinityLive and how it works from a first principles point of view. I know it might sound a little bit boring, but it's actually kind of the most valuable way to get your head around it, because it is a relatively big product in terms of what it is and how it works. So we'll, without any more fuss, we'll get straight into it. Okay, so the first thing to cover off is what does AffinityLive do? And so AffinityLive is really designed to be an end-to-end platform for managing all the client work you do in a professional service business, all the way from sales and marketing and that kind of CRM angle at one end, around into things like jobs and projects and timesheets and approving time and budgets and all of the work that goes into making sure that you deliver your planned work for clients in a successful way that meets deadlines and frankly makes you money, and then ends up spitting out an invoice and managing a payments process as well, so that you've got that all in one place. And then also, if you like, the other track is, instead of the planned or structured things like projects and jobs, you've actually got things like issues, client service requests, retainers and contracts if you do those sorts of things in your business. And the idea of those sorts of things is they're more the reactive stuff that comes up. That's where clients ask for things here or there, and you're able to manage it through a process that's less, I guess, known from the outset and more responsive. And in the middle, the product handles a lot of helper processes in the business. So if those main bubbles handle the business model type things, which is how you do your work and make money, what we've got in the middle is a whole bunch of tools and features that help your staff to be more productive. Because what we know is that about 80% of the costs in a professional service business are labor costs. So if we can find a way to increase the productivity of your staff, make it easier for them to work together and deliver great service for their clients, and that's going to go straight to your bottom line. And so we've got things like, timesheets and timers. We've got automatic email capture, integrated document management, client extranet, task list, calendar integration, and scheduling. And we'll cover some of those in the next little while too. Now, this is a bit of an ugly diagram, but what it's trying to communicate is, at a high level, how AffinityLive works. And that was what I was talking about with how it's put together. So if we'll spend just a minute on this screen, don't be turned off, it's a bit ugly. What I wanted to do is just show you how the different bits fit together. So up in the top, where we've got the blue section of company, contact, and affiliation, that's really your client record inside that box. Those three come together to create a client record. So the company record obviously is the name of the company and maybe their web address and a few other details like categories, segments, or groups that you put them in. Your contact is an individual person with a first name and a surname and maybe a date of birth and other fields like that, and that represents a real human, someone with DNA. And then you've got your affiliation, which is a connection between the two, which enables you to say that Joe works for company X. But then you could also say that Joe is on the board of directors of company Y. And you can have one Joe that has both of those relationships, as well, of course, as a more common scenario where you've got company X has both Tom, Sally, and also Joe working there. So you can have the company that links to multiple contacts. And it's that affiliation in the middle, which is where we store things like email addresses, phone numbers, position titles and descriptions and roles and things like that. So that's why we've got those guys as a group there, to give you the flexibility to support what happens in the real world. And so outside of your client record, you've then got the different modules inside AffinityLive. So the purpley looking module there, the pinky colored one, is the prospects or the sales module. So that's all about helping you manage a sales opportunity or a proposal, or you can call it lots of different things, but we call them a prospect by default, and that enables you to manage that, making sure you do your follow-ups and everything that goes on with being a prospect. So here we handle things like the value of the deal, the probability of it coming off, how much to weight the deal. So if it's very early stage, it gets weighted lightly. So if it's a $50,000 deal, but you've only just had an inquiry come in over the phone, then that shouldn't really count too much into forecasted revenue. Whereas if the deal's, at the point where the contract's about to be signed, then, obviously that's a much higher stage of the deal. We've then got the jobs module. So what will often happen, it doesn't have to be this way, but you'll have a sales opportunity or a prospect, which will then create or lead on to some work or a job being done. It could be multiple jobs. Or alternatively, for a client who you've got on a regular basis, they might not need a whole sales process. They might just say, hey, I need to get going, and you kick off a job. And that's the guy in the green there. Now, what happens on a job, of course, is that you can then have your staff spend their time and energy and hours, and that can then spit out and go through an approval process to generate an invoice. Or alternatively, you can go through a process to then allocate that time or eat that time up against a contract. We'll talk about contracts a bit later. Then we have the issues module, the first guy in sort of the yellowy color there. And the issues module is designed to help you manage the reactive client service work. So if a job is a planned thing where you've got a bit of a project plan, you know what you're going to be doing, and you've got a budget, and it's all, a little bit visible and clear to you, then the issues module is actually the reactive stuff. And depending on the type of business you're in, that might be, let's say, your graphic design agency, it's a client asking for a logo in a different format to be able to pop in an email or a report for somebody else. So it might be, for example, a web development company might be changing an image on a website. Or if you're a lawyer, it might be a small little question about a matter that you've already dealt with or some contracts you've drafted, and they just ask for clarification. It might take you half an hour to do. You don't want to, create a whole big job and matter and everything that goes with it. And so on and so forth. You can probably see there's lots of different industries there. And so again, the hours that get spent on that can be pushed through and then eaten up into things like contracts or put onto invoices as well. Or you can make them free of charge if you don't want to be, charging like a wounded bull. And then there's the contracts module. So that allows you to handle retainers and say, hey, okay, this client here is going to pay us X dollars per month or per quarter or per week or per year. And that's going to buy them, for example, Y number of hours, which then can be eaten up through the jobs and the issues. And it handles that all automatically. So no more, trying to work out which spreadsheet has or hasn't been updated with the budget and the hours you're working on. And then last of all, everything turns up or can turn up into an invoice or an account, which then can be either sent directly from AffinityLive or it can be pushed off to your accounting system for further processing. And then wrapping it all off, underneath you've got the concepts which are common across the whole system of what we call diary entries, which are like file notes and emails and appointments. You've also got tasks and reminders, and you've got the ability to log your time through timesheets. Okay, so that's the high level. Now we're going to start getting into more of the nuts and bolts. So what I wanted to do was just cover off the 6 fundamental principles of AffinityLive. These are the 6 things, if you like, that if you get these right, if you understand what these are, then you're set. So the first thing is that everything in the system comes back eventually to a company or client. So everything, every sales opportunity is with a company or client. Every project or job is with a company or client. Every support issue, every invoice, every contract, everything eventually comes back to a company or client. And that's a very deliberate choice because we're very much a client-focused system here managing the work that you do for your clients. So if you're going to manage that, you kind of need to know who they are. The second fundamental principle is that there are different modules in AffinityLive to manage different business processes. And while, as you'll see, there's some commonality amongst them, they have special design features that are designed specifically for different types of business process. So, for example, the prospects module handles things like probabilities of whether a deal is going to come off and weighting the value of a deal. The jobs module's got workflows and Gantt charts. The issues module is more about, what were the reported, what's the class of issue or service request, and then how do we resolve or sort that out for the client. The contracts module handles things like stored value and eating up budgets gradually, and the accounts module handles the creation of invoices and handling of payments. So again, different modules, different jobs, but some commonalities you'll see which make it easy for staff to go between modules. The third feature or the third fundamental principle of AffinityLive is that if you want to use the reminders and scheduling functionality built into AffinityLive, you'll want to use these tasks. Now these tasks are the little guys in purple there, and what they allow you to do, you can find them from a company screen or from a sales opportunity / prospect screen or from a job on a particular component, etc., etc. You'll see the purple box all over the place. And by using that box and creating your tasks and things you've got to do for clients or do as part of your work, what will happen is it'll automatically then drop that time into the scheduling bar. So up in the top of AffinityLive, whenever you're using it, you've got a button called Schedule, and you can click on that button and actually see a forecast of how busy you are in your schedule. So that allows you to see and forecast all of the work that your team are doing. But unless they use the scheduling box here, the schedule itself will be relatively light on and will only contain things like these purple entries, which are external calendar entries that they've put into their Google Calendar or their Exchange Calendar, for example. So definitely use tasks. They're great. The fourth concept, or the fourth fundamental principle, is you use these things called diary entries, which you can access on almost any screen by clicking on the little yellow post-it note icon. I'm not sure. I haven't got it really obvious here. I should make it more obvious. There's a little yellow notepad post-it note type icon. If you click on that, it'll load up what we call the diary entry. And if you see the screenshot we're looking at here, it's quite a powerful screen that lets you do a bunch of different things in one place. So it allows you to do things such as the tabs across the top allow you to schedule appointments or meetings, for example, with the client. And when you do that and hit save, if you've got the system hooked up to your Google Calendar or your Exchange Calendar, it'll actually push an appointment directly across into your calendar and invite your colleagues, your other staff members. If you choose email, for example, it'll send an email message. It'll top and tail it or skin it with some pretty with your logo and things like that, and so on and so forth. You can even send and process tweets from here. The other thing that's powerful about this screen is it allows you to log the time that you spend. So this is, if you like, half of the timesheet equation. This allows you to log time as you go, but there's also a timesheet interface that allows you to log time across the entire day in one place in more of a tabular view. The fifth fundamental principle is you can systemize your business processes using things called statuses and progressions. So across the top of this screenshot we're looking at here, you can see that there's the purple, the green, and the blue buttons. And they're what we call our status progressions. So what we can see is that right now, this particular sales opportunity or prospect is in the verbal approval phase. And from here, what the client can do, or the user can do, sorry, is choose three different options. They can either draft the contract and send it, or mark it as draft contract and sent. They can abandon it, or they can say that the client's interested, but not right now. Put them in a pause status. Now, you can configure everything about these buttons. You can configure what the statuses are for your different types of sales opportunity or your different types of job. You can configure the rules that link them together a bit like lines on a flowchart. So in a sense, what we're describing here is the different line paths that someone can take from the verbal approval stage. And you can then move the project through a series of those steps or phases. And you can configure that yourself. Now, one of the things that's powerful about this, if you're running a professional service business, you probably appreciate that it requires a lot of discipline on behalf of your users and a lot of understanding how that business works. It takes them a while to get going before they're, if you like, autonomous at managing things through a process and making sure stuff doesn't get forgotten. And it also means then you end up with issues potentially of consistency. Whereas with this feature here, you're able to configure those steps and statuses. And often for the first time in a professional service business, you can actually manage an entire business process through something like AffinityLive. So you can start to achieve a bit of consistency and make sure your staff don't forget things. Because as you go through these steps and statuses, not only are you directing someone down one of a number of paths, but you're also then able to configure it so that when they click on contract drafted and sent, the system can prompt them to upload a copy of that contract so it's kept inside AffinityLive for safekeeping. And it might also prompt an email to automatically go out to the scheduling manager of the business to say, hey, we've just sent this contract off for sign-off. Just a heads up that there's probably going to be some stuff come out of this. And so on and so forth. You can get staff members to update dollar value fields, probabilities, all sorts of stuff can happen automatically as part of these progressions or business processes. And the last comment I'll make is that you can use these things called types and extensions to customize AffinityLive for your business. So a quick example, if you're a graphic design agency, you might have, let's say, 3 different types of job. You might have a logo design type of job, you might have an annual report type of job, and you might have, for example, a brochure type of job. And so what you can do is for an annual report type of job, you can have a whole lot of fields that talk about which staff member is going to provide the chairman's report and where are we going to get the details for other parts of the annual report. And so you can configure those custom fields so that then when a new staff member or one of your team comes into work on the job, they can quickly see in front of them all the key information and know what's going on. Whereas if you're doing a logo job, instead you might be entering things like who are a couple of their key competitors that you need to be conscious of and making sure that you're very different to. And so based on the different types of jobs that you do, you can actually have AffinityLive capture and configure certain custom fields that you work with. All right, so that gets us to the end of the slide deck side of things. Now we'll jump into demo land. And of course, if you've got any questions at all, feel free to fire them through as we go, and I'll get onto them as we get to the appropriate sections and make sure I cover them for you. Okay, so first of all, let's have a look. I'm just going to switch screens around here. 1 second. Okay, so we've just got a bit of a demo system that we're loading up here. It's got a bunch of dummy data in it, so hopefully it's not too painful. And what we're going to do is shoot through a bit of a demo. We're going to cover, first of all, the company and client module. Then we're going to look at prospects, jobs, issues, contracts, a quick look at accounts. Then we're going to talk about diary entries, tasks, and cover off any other Q&A. And as we get to certain sections, such as the company section, we'll get in and we'll have a look at how some of the more useful, cool functionality works around things like, for example, email capture and stuff like that, which I know there's already been a couple of questions come through on. Okay, I'll try this one here. See, that one's not. I'm just going to try and find a test job here, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, I wanted to find a company with a bunch of dummy data against them. Ah, here we go. Nice and strong one. Okay. That's why they weren't coming up. So what we're looking at here is a company record, and this company record's for a company called Jackson Solutions. We can see who the account manager is. In this case, it's myself. And down on the main part of the screen here, we've got ourselves an activity stream. Now, this is a bit like the Facebook newsfeed. This allows you to go through and see all of the recent stuff that's been going on with a client backwards and forwards. And you can see that we've got these a lot of emails in here. And the reason we've got these is because one of AffinityLive's key benefits is the ability to automatically capture all the emails that come into and go out of your business where they are either something you send or receive from a client. So these have all been automatically captured in here, for example. Now, we had a question come through. It was from David asking how to link historical emails that are already in Gmail and to capture them into AffinityLive. When you first hook up AffinityLive to your Google Apps account, what happens is the system will go through and try and capture or pull in the last 30 days worth of emails. We don't go back and pull in the potentially tens of gigs of emails that you have in your Gmail account historically. We try and pull in the last 30 days when we first get started. And when we do that, and it's important probably to explain how the email capture works for everyone's benefit. So the email capture system will only capture an email that is sent to or received from a company or a contact whose email address is in here in the contacts area. So in this case, gaaron@jackson-solutions.com. If an email came in from Aaron and was sitting in my all mail folder or my inbox, then it'll be automatically captured into AffinityLive. However, if at the point when the system did its first import, this person's email address was not here, then that email wouldn't be captured. And unfortunately, that's kind of the way it needs to be, just because we don't want to end up surprising people after the fact. Because the key thing here is that while we can pick up emails from various users' inboxes, the address book or the list of email addresses is actually common across the whole platform, as you'd expect for a shared CRM. So hopefully that makes sense to you there, David. Sorry we can't go back and get everything from history, but certainly from the point that you've got a contact's email address inside AffinityLive and you handle the sync or you send an email to them, then it'll automatically pick it up. Another point that I'll mention for our many Gmail or Google Apps users is there are actually two ways to configure the integration, and I would recommend that you use the forwarding mechanism rather than the sync mechanism. The forwarding mechanism is more speedy. It means that as soon as an email hits the Gmail servers, it's processed into AffinityLive, whereas the sync method requires us to go and fetch them from your Gmail account on an occasional basis. So definitely use the forwarding mechanism if you've got the choice. And David, there's further questions. What I'll do is I'll take those offline just so we don't slow things down too much for everyone else, and we'll do a specific look at yours. Okay, so that's the company activity and then the contacts area. Now, another thing people often want to know about is, hey, I love the idea of it synchronizing my contacts or my address book records with Google and AffinityLive. How do I do that? Or with Exchange. So what you can do is, once you've set up the connection, either because you came in with Google Apps or you clicked on the integrations button up here and turned on the connection, then what happens is you can take someone here, for example, like Mr. German, and click on Send to Address Book. And what that will do is it'll push that contact across to your Google Address Book, and then it will maintain an ongoing synchronization with that contact. So if you change German's name or phone number inside your Google Address Book, it'll then pull that information back across into AffinityLive. And of course, vice versa. What we don't do, though, is we don't automatically push every contact inside AffinityLive into your personal address book inside Google Apps, or for that matter, Exchange. And the reason is we sometimes see clients with tens of thousands of company records across the system, and what we didn't want to do was destroy their mobile phone sync or make their address book unmanageable with too many contacts. So the idea is that you designate that you want to start to monitor or have a closer, tighter relationship with somebody by sending it to the address book once, and then after you've done that, the system will maintain it on an ongoing basis for you in both places. Okay, so that's the contacts area. We've also got a details area, which is where you're able to have custom fields and categories to your heart's content. That's where you do your traditional CRM stuff of, is a customer VIP, or are they this, or are they that? And it also gives you address fields. So you're able to put in the address details, and that's what then allows us to see the time zone of a particular user. So back over here on the contact screen, we can see that the time is currently Tuesday at 6:24 for this particular client, wherever they are in the world. Wrapping up, a couple of last little things on this screen here. So we've got a series of recent activities or things that are going on with a client. So we can see that we've got some details such as the sales opportunities here, the jobs or projects we're working on, the issues that are going on, and any contracts. So you're able to go through here pretty quickly and easily and see a snapshot of what the heck's going on with this client at any given time. All right, so that's the companies area. Couple of quick things to cover before we leave. One of them is a brand new piece of functionality we've only just shipped called our Client Extranet. And our Client Extranet is something where you can invite your individual clients to log into AffinityLive themselves and see their own company record. And so the way that you get to that is you're able to click on the Extranet usage link on a particular company screen, and then from here it'll load up a list of all of the contacts or people that you have at the client. All the clients you've actually entered into the system, and then what you're able to do is go through and send an email to that contact. Or you can edit their details, such as their username. When you send the email, it actually resets automatically the password of that user and sends it to them, invites them to log into the AffinityLive Extranet. What I'd encourage you to do in terms of playing with it is actually enter your own company details as a company or contact or a client, and then send it to yourself. And that way you'll be able to see it from, if you like, a client perspective, what's going on. The last thing I wanted to show you, and this is a common feature across many of the screens of the system, is this concept here of the diary entries. So these are effectively like a bit of an inbox, if you like, or a folder of email correspondence or other notes that have occurred against a particular company record here. So for us, we're able to see that these are the emails that have been captured, that haven't been done against a specific job or a project. We've also got the resources. And this allows us to go through and attach files and actually put those files directly into AffinityLive. Oh, hang on a sec. I've just noticed GoToWebinar being upset with me. One moment. Sorry, I'll capture this back again. I think we got a bit behind the times there. Here we go. Okay, so this is the resources area, and this allows you to attach files directly into AffinityLive, where you can upload those files and put them straight in. And you can do that through the web interface, or you can also do it through what's like a network drive interface. So I'll quickly show you that because it's worth showing. Quickly changing windows here. 1 second. Okay, so in this case, I'm just logging in here. Sorry, I've focused on just the security pop-up. I actually want the wider window. see whether I'm getting this right. Cool. So what I'm able to do, you can see up in the address bar, I'm not sure how much you need to squint to see it on your screen resolutions on that end, but you're able to see up in the address bar here how we've got a company, how we've logged into what's mapped as a network drive. In this case, it's the N drive. And then what I'm able to do is drill in and find this particular company I was just playing with, which is Jackson Solutions. And I can see that we've got these different folders here of jobs and issues and prospects. And so what I could do is I could drag and drop from my desktop any files and folders I want and have them automatically appear inside AffinityLive. One of the cool things about this is it allows you to allow your users to, if you like, do things the way they've always done them without having to change too much. They can still be familiar with the concepts of network drives and Word documents and proposals and stuff, but you get the benefits of being stored in the cloud against the client record inside AffinityLive, which is a really big benefit, particularly when it comes to having that single central customer view. All right, so that's probably about enough of the tour for the company screen. We'll probably pick this pace up a little bit from here on in, so if you're worried, don't be. Now we're going to go over and have a look at a particular client record, for example. Sorry, a particular sales record. Okay, so here's an existing sale we've got in the system. What I'll do is I'll just say, for example, they are reviewing the proposal and hit save. And so what we can see here is a particular sales opportunity with the statuses and progressions across the top here. We can see who it's for and how much we think the deal's worth. We can see where the client's up to and what the comments are, and as you saw, I was able to edit those really quickly and make changes there. We can see things like the rating. So a rating is something that's used to represent how attractive the deal is to you. And it's a simple star rating, and you can use whatever mechanism you want to represent, if you like, attractiveness or appeal of the deal. You can see the amount of time and energy that's been spent on working on the deal so far, the probability of it coming off. Again, you can customize these completely yourself. And then what happens is, based on where you're up to in terms of the statuses, so in this case, requirements discussed, that combined with where you're up to in the probability modifies your little cute thermometer here and helps you see how close you are to getting the deal closed or signed off. And so I'll just show you what I mean. You can click up here in the progressions area and say, yeah, we've price qualified them now. So I move through to that step, and we say, oh, they requested a proposal. Great, move through to that step. And let's say I'd now write the proposal and send it through. And the way I'd do that is I'd add a diary entry and upload the proposal, and then I can say, yep, I've delivered or sent the proposal now. Awesome. And as you can see, we're starting to build a history of where this deal's up to and how we're stepping through it. And as we do, you can see the thermometer keeps growing and getting further and further towards the top. Now, of course, this example is a little bit contrived, but you're able to configure AffinityLive to do all sorts of things. Actually, I've just noticed a question that I missed back on the company screen that's worth mentioning. Sean asked whether or not there's a way to, Sean Michelle asked whether or not there's a way to create custom fields for contacts. Yes, there is, Sean. The way that you do that is by using what we call profiles, and I'll show you that towards the end when we get to the admin section and show you how we can create those fields. Okay, so this is the sales type or proposals or sales opportunity area, and this is a good example of where I can use the tasks section. So let's say, for example, the client had requested the proposal. I could put in a reminder for myself, and I could say, write proposal and send. And I could say, look, I want to try and send that to the client by the 4th. And for anyone who's looking at these dates and going, hey, they're backwards, don't worry about that. You're able to configure the date format inside AffinityLive yourself. And so let's say I wanted to spend 2.5 hours working on that particular proposal. I thought it was going to take me 2.5 hours to do. What I can do is I can save that. That's now gone in as a task and will appear both on my schedule and my to-do list. And we'll have a look at that in a minute. So that's the kind of sales or proposals area. And let's say I wanted to send an email to this client to follow up and say, hey, how are you going with the deal? What I can do is click on Add Diary. So it looks like the webinar is dragging a little bit here in terms of its sync, so hopefully you guys catch up pretty quickly. Come on, technology. Okay, so what we're able to do is we can see as this thing catches up on your end there, all of this is the screen where we'd use if we wanted to send the client a quick email and say, hey, here's an update. So I could send an email, for example. It automatically chooses the person who the deal's against. Just proposal follow up. Hi, Bobby. Just letting you know I'm working on that prop for you. Should have it by Thursday at the latest. And let's say I'd actually spent 15 minutes getting my act together for that email. I might have reviewed my notes and wanted to just keep track of it. Then I can go through and I can say, yep, this is part of my right proposal and send. And after reviewing my notes, I worked out that it's actually only going to take me an hour and a half to do because it's pretty straightforward. And so what I can do now is hit send on that, and it will then save that entry into AffinityLive. It'll also send the email automatically to Bobby and BCC it to myself, just so I've got a copy of it in my universal sort of inbox. And it's keeping track of the time that I spent, so it knows now that I've spent over 15 minutes working on this particular deal. And I can see as well that I've only got 1.5 hours remaining on this particular task because I re-estimated it down. So it just gives you a practical example of how you use AffinityLive to follow up in your sales process and your sales opportunity. All right. The next step is we'll probably go over and have a look at the jobs area. That's not probably the best one for me. So let's go across here and let's have a look at the search for all the different jobs. Try and find something with a bit of meat in it. This would be a good one. Actually, before we do that, I'll show you. This is a screen I didn't show you, which was a bit remiss of me. Sorry, I just wait for it to catch up there. You've got the ability to see your pipeline, if you like, of all the different deals that you've got out there at any given time. And then you can also look at things, for example, like the rate of new sales opportunities created, or entries made, or all sorts of other things that you can keep track of in terms of built-in dashboards and reports. That's quite handy. Okay, but we'll come back across to the jobs area, which is where we just were. I just didn't want to miss that cool funnel screen. That was a bit of eye candy. Okay, so this is a particular job we're looking at here. And we can see a few things that's interesting about it. We can see the different components or pieces of the actual job which have been structured. Each of these different components here has a different staff member who manages them, has a different budget attached to it. And we can see across the bottom here how far through the progress we are and what our budget utilization looks like at any given moment in time. We can also see a graph of the work that we've got going on. What we're doing here is we're using a demo of some copied data, which is sort of old school, if you like, and a little bit out of date. We can also see a budget utilization. So we can see the different components of the project, and we can see the hours that have been used against those budget utilizations and the amount that's unused, for example, in your budget forecast. You can also see your schedule, which enables you to see a real-time Gantt chart. As I mentioned, this was if you like, a bit of a copied and sanitized project, so it's a bit out of date, but you can see how this sort of stuff here works, so that it keeps track of all the different phases of the job and where you're up to. And you've also got the details area that enables you to see a whole bunch of different information, which are those custom fields or extensions. And we'll talk about those in a bit more detail in a minute. You'll see probably a familiar representation here of the different statuses and progressions across the top bar that allows you to see where things are at and how they're progressing. And you're also probably seeing familiarity down the bottom here with the different diary entries, the resources, for example, and things like that. And you can see my T-shirt cover note test record that I actually uploaded or showed you in the interface, the file sharing interface before, is down here attached. So it's the same files that are accessible, whether it's via the network drive view or via the web browser view. So if we can imagine, for example, a user's gone in, they've gone in and configured what we call a workflow, which is the list of components or the different types of bits of work that are going on inside this job here. And each of the components has, for example, a rate, a number of hours that are attached to it, that then comes out with a total project value, who's been allocated the work, whether they're dependencies that this task can't finish until these ones have been started, for example. So all of those things are able to be configured, and if you end up with a workflow that you really like, which is a standard representation of the work that you do, you can save that as a template, which means next time you come in to create a job, you just pick from a pick list and get straight in. You don't have to fuss around with creating extra, different components. If you did want to customize or change it, you could of course do that, or you can add custom components here by dropping them in place. And again, all of those components that you can drop in place, the list that's there, and all the defaults that go with them, such as rates, who looks after them, and those sorts of things are all able to be configured centrally inside AffinityLive too. Okay. So you've gone through, you've created all of your different components and your workflow, you know what your various parts of this job look like and are going to be, and then your next step is to say, okay, cool, now I need to have my staff go through and log their time. So your staff will log their time in a couple of different ways. They can log their time through the diary entries like we showed earlier when we sent an email out, or they can go to their work screen here, and what that will do is it'll show them all of the different tasks and components, these guys here, that are currently outstanding and are available for them to complete. And then they can log their time against them. And as they do, the budget gets eaten up in real time. But of course, you probably want to review those hours. You want to review those entries. You don't just want to pass them straight through to the keeper. So what you can do is you can go to the Process tab here and choose Approve, and then you can go through and manage the actual approval process around this work. So here we have a list of the different bits of work that have gone in, the hours that have been allocated and used. And let's say, for example, Christine had 0 hours here, but I knew that that wasn't true because I knew she spent an hour and a half. I could change that value there, and when I hit OK, it's going to put a dollar value in this column here, and it's going to update the total for this component to represent that. So now we've got increased values, and I could choose as well to increase this number here, and let's make that 4.5 hours. And eventually, after I've gone through and put a stupid number of hours in, it'll actually change these guys to red because I've gone over budget. I've got a 24-hour budget and I've gone up to 40. So I can do those sorts of things. I can make hours non-billable just by moving them in a toggle. Pretty straightforward. So what you're able to do with AffinityLive is actually keep track of the work that's going on and then approve all of that work, and then you can lock it in place. And so once that hours or that work's been locked in place, you can then either invoice for that work or you can link and allocate it back to a support contract or package. One other thing I'll show you on this screen before we leave. If we work out, for example, that this work here actually should go against this component, you can drag it down here really easily. So you can move your budgets around very easily, and if I want to take my 20-hour block and bring it up here, I can do that. So you're able to move the budgets and the hours around really easily inside AffinityLive before you save them out. Once you've actually created all of your, or done all your approvals, or even if before you have any hours, potentially you can invoice a fixed amount, you can go to the Invoice tab. And what this allows you to do is go through and create an invoice for this particular job. So it might be deposit invoice, and we might invoice, let's say, 40% as an upfront amount. Who do we send it to? We're going to send it to Pete. What's our tax code? My tax codes and ledgers have dropped out, but there are fields that you can configure. So if you have a sales tax or a VAT or a GST or whatever your actual tax arrangements are, you can configure those. You also have your ledger codes here, which you can configure yourself, or alternatively, you can put them in. You can do an integration with products like Xero and Sasu, and in the future QuickBooks Online and FreshBooks, and be able to pull in ledger codes or their records, so then when you actually create an invoice and push your entries across, they go into the right locations and make sure your reporting's all nice and easy. Because I don't have any ledger codes, it hasn't done the percentage calculation, but basically what it'll do is give me all of my numbers here and then allow me to send an invoice straight out the door, along with the description, and that I could choose whether to email or fax that invoice to the client. And that's compared to the effort of going through lots of different timesheets and spreadsheets and other manual cumbersome processes to generate a bill. This whole process here is a heck of a lot easier. Basically, you go on a screen, choose the component or the amount, hit go, and out it goes. Okay, so that's how we create invoices inside against a job, and that pretty much rounds out all the things I wanted to cover in the jobs module. Our next step now will be to have a quick look at the issues module, and then in about 5 minutes time we'll have covered all the bits we need and we'll open up for some Q&A. So what I'm going to do, first of all, have a look at the issues module here. I'm just going to do a search for a particular company record here and have some have some fun with it. So what we're able to do, you might have noticed me quickly go up into the search area here in the top right. That's the most common way to actually find things inside Affinity Live. You're able to go up, choose enter some information, some text, and choose what you want to search against, and then hit go. And it'll find a list of those particular records that match in some way. In the case of issues, it matches against the company name as well as the description or subject of the issue. Against the contact or a company record, you can search based on first name, surname, company name, email address, even mobile phone number if you get a missed call and you don't know who it's from. So the different searches match on different things. Okay, so we'll go in and have a look at a particular, particular client record here. So we can go in. I'll just change this. They want to be able to update some links. Hit save. And so what can happen is a client can create this issue by emailing, for example, a support email address, or putting in a request inside the extranet, or, of course, by picking up the phone and or dropping you a line, or whatever they choose to do. And so with an issue, you'll start to see across the top here some commonalities. So again, we've got our progressions fields, how you're able to go from step to step to step. And then, of course, as you go from step to step to step, the system can prompt you to do certain things. So when we resolve the issue here, and again, all those titles and fields are customizable, the system prompts you to say, well, what did we do? We made the change in the code. And what did we do? How did we do it? We made a change in our data, for example. And then we're able to go through and allocate the billings of this work and say, oh, actually, Chris didn't spend 2.5 minutes. She spent 25 minutes on it. Modify the amount, and then choose, oh, hang on, we've got the existing package in place for this client, so we're going to link the hours to that. And that's then going to mean that those hours get allocated back onto that package. So again, staff can use the diary entries as we've covered. They can use the tasks where they can create different things in different fields. And all of that stuff can be done built into Affinity Live in a very common and standard format across the whole system, just like you've seen elsewhere. But in this case, it's about managing that reactive client service type work. So some examples of where you use the issues in business. We've had web development companies who really love this because it's a bit like a ticketing system that they would otherwise be using, but it's all very client orientated. And it handles integrated billing as opposed to just being a way of keeping track of bugs and issues. We've also got, who else? We've got companies that do consulting work that have to do monthly reports for their clients. And they love to use this interface here to just do their regular updates and keep track of what's going on. So every month they move the progression forward and say, okay, we're back into reporting mode. It'll automatically create the task or the guy in purple down there to say they have to finish that work in the first week of the month, and then it becomes part of their schedule automatically. And then once they've done the work for that month, they tick another progression that puts them back into the waiting until next month phase. Sort of simple stuff like that people use inside Affinity Live to manage all the work that they're doing for clients. Okay, so that's a quick look at the issues area, and again, it's really reusing so many of the common fundamental principles your users will be used to from other modules. We've got the contracts module. So the contracts module here is important but kind of boring, because what the contracts module is all about is helping you to manage ongoing retainer-based relationships with clients. So you're able to keep track of all of the work that you're doing across the system, and then you have these budgets and these hours here that your staff are then able to effectively log or allocate their time against. And that time can then come in here and be logged against these records and be saved so that as they're doing work on issues and jobs, you as a manager can then be allocating and eating up these budgets here. And of course, the contracts modules handles things like automatically renewing contracts and sending invoices and stuff like that. The accounts module is the invoicing area, relatively straightforward. For us, invoicing is really kind of an end-of-the-line process, very important, but end-of-the-line process. And then what we do is we hand that off to an accounting system. So we're all about creating the bill because we've got things like the timesheets and the project plans, and then you're able to go through and see a report, see a dollar amount, and create those entries automatically. So that's just some dummy stuff there. The only other things I wanted to cover is the scheduling screen here. So every staff member has a scheduling screen, and we're actually working on an improvement where you can have multiple staff listed down the same screen so you can see who's the least busy in inverted commas. So what happens is the system will look at all of the outstanding things that are waiting to be completed. So for example, this requirements analysis, I'll change this from being 39 days overdue. As I mentioned, this is some old dummy data. And I'll move that forward to here, and I'll make it that I've got another 10 hours worth of work remaining to get that task completed. By making that change for requirements analysis, what we now see is we get a whole bunch of these green guys here appear. And the reason they do with 2.5 hours on this day is because the system knows that if I'm going to get that 10 hours worth of work done by Friday, I'm going to have to spend 2.5 hours on average on each of the 4 days I've got available to get that work completed. And what I can do as a user is I can actually take control of my schedule. So I can say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to spend the morning working on that on whatever it is, Thursday. And so you can make that change and hit save, and the system will then modify and change that to blue. That dark blue color shows that it's a commitment, or as someone said or estimated they're going to work on it that day, and it'll reduce the available hours back, or reduce the automatic hours back, so that you don't end up with quite as many green or automatic areas on different days. The system automatically adapts and moves that time around. And so as every day goes by, the system automatically updates all of that stuff, and it's quite powerful in terms of how it enables your staff members to work together collaboratively. It also gives you visibility of how busy everyone is in a forward-looking sense. The other component here, or the other feature, which is a bit of a summary guy, is this concept of the work screen. And so this allows me to see all of the different units of work that I've got that I could be logging time or doing work on any given day. And if I want to do some work, I can hit the little the play icon, and it'll keep track of the time that I'm spending. And I can go across, if I'm a designer, I'll go across to my Photoshop or my Illustrator or something like that to do my work. And then I'll come back, and the timer might end up, sort of saying 1 hour 45, and then I can go in and log my work. And when I log my work, I can tell my supervisor, for example, what I've been doing. I can re-estimate the time that's remaining and say, actually, it's not a 10-hour job. It's actually more like a 3-hour job from here. I can save that, and it goes straight into the system and logs that time automatically. And then if I come back to my schedule, what it'll do is actually show me now this kind of lighter blue section, which is the work I've logged, and they'll actually change the automatic allocations too, because I've re-estimated that the job isn't quite as big as I thought it was going to be. So that's the scheduling area there. These purple guys here are pretty cool. What they allow you to do is keep track of the external time that you have in your calendar. And so they're able to pull in from your Google Apps or your Exchange calendars and show your external work that's going on too. All right, well, that's pretty much all I wanted to do in terms of a structured tour from a webinar perspective. Actually, there is one more thing I wanted to show, sorry, my apologies, is how to do configurations. So what you're able to do in terms of configuring your business processes is you're able to go through and set up all of the different, and I'm just waiting to load up a smaller screen here. This is a good example. So this screen here shows you, as it catches up, how the business processes for a job of type consulting are configured to work. So I can see that if job type consulting, I've got 8 jobs that are currently in that type. I can see that I've got these different statuses here, these different progressions that go from and to. And then what I can do is some of them, for example, have actions. So it says when I schedule something, when I go from potential to scheduled, it prompts me to update some records like the client delivery field, the system type field, and a testing field. And I can remove those pretty easily, for example. So what's great about this is you can do all sorts of stuff. You can have an alert field, for example, which says, I want to send this particular message to a particular staff member. I can say it's a required field, for example. And so what that will do is that'll say when you come in and you're working on that particular guy that it's going to now require the user to enter some fields and some information in here. So that's a classic example of how you run your business processes. What you're also able to do aside from those is you're able to create new progressions. So what you do when you click on new progressions, the system says we'll drag a from and a to. So you can say, okay, I'm going from the sourcing status and I'm going across to the qualifying status here. And I can call it qualify, and I can give it an icon, for example, and hit save. And what that will do now is give me this new progression, this new, I guess, business process or line joining two boxes on a flowchart. In addition to these progressions, you can also have custom fields. So these are some examples for consulting. We've got the extensions custom field here. So what I can create is a new one, test fields, and I can choose that to be a text box or a drop-down box. So fix select, for example. I can say, okay, the default value is test, and the options are test, dog, and food. So you can then go through and your users can then be prompted to update those records as they go. So you can have a progression which goes from step 1 to step 2 and prompts the user to enter the value of this test field here. For example, I know it's a bit of a contrived example, but that's the sort of thing that you can do in terms of configuring your entire business processes and what goes on there. All right, so I might throw it open to Q&A now. David, you had a question there, so I'm going to try and unmute you and see how this works. Can you hear me there, mate?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. So fire away for us.
Excellent. Okay, let's see. Okay, well, the email thing, I do want to take offline, but I'm just curious. I see like the most recent email showing up, but it's not going back through the full 30 days, and I'm wondering if there's any way I can force that to happen.
That's a good question. We'd have to force that manually at the moment in the systems. We keep a timestamp of when we last asked for your mail, and we say to Google, hey, only send us the stuff that's come in since this time. So we'd have to kind of manually force that, but that's a good question, and I think maybe that's something we should look to building into the product from a one-off or a special case scenario, saying, hey, go back and fetch my mail from this point, please. We just need to make sure we take into account the ability for people to unintentionally abuse that, if you know what I mean, because we know we get a lot of mail. So no, that's good feedback.
Well, and plus when you first switch people over, they're going to have some history they need to come over with the current processes. So
yeah.
But see, the other question I wanted to ask you was, is it purposely, or is it something I'm doing that it's not pulling the company address and website out of the contacts? That's something.
Yeah, great question. I hope none of my Google friends see this webinar when we put it up and recorded, but unfortunately the API for the address details is unfortunately pretty rubbish for pulling records out. So when we push them across to Google, we've got a really nice structured data format where we provide all of the details in separate fields, street address 1, street address 2, city, zip code, all of that jazz. When we pull it back and say, hey, Google, give us the most recently changed company records, or contact records, we get the address details back as a blob of text. We got no structure whatsoever. So it's really, really hard to then parse that up in any reliable way. So we do our best efforts, but yeah, frankly, it's we got no promises we can make there, unfortunately, that the data is going to be in a format that we can make sense of it. In terms of the website, that should actually be an easy field for us to pull back. So if we're not doing that properly, my guess is that one's probably more likely to be a bug. And what I might quickly do is show everybody as well who's watching here. One of the best ways to give us feedback, because the product is still in a public beta, one of the best ways to give us feedback and ask questions is using this help link up here. So every single screen has this little help link with a question mark on it, which is actually built into the screen you're on. There's also a common one across the top, which goes off to our user guide. But here we've got a help link. And if you click on that, you can then put in a subject, why can't I sync website address, and then you can hit submit, and that'll push that through to us. And when it pushes the request through to us, it'll also do it in a pretty clever way, in the sense that it'll also give us the telemetry of what you're looking at that time, so we can, as best as possible, recognize or represent what's going on. So yeah.
And will that come back as a response to the sender?
We don't do an auto reply at the moment, but it comes through to our team as a request, which then gets processed. And yeah, I mean, if we're doing our job, we'll be getting back to you, that's for sure.
Good. And then my final question was, what does it take to become reseller, and what is the commission structure? How does it work?
Yeah, sure. We'll take that one offline because we're still forming that project or the structure around that. So yeah, we'll have a chat about that separately. But we are very much looking for. We're thinking of them more as implementation and basically partners as opposed to resellers. Although it's really semantics for a lot of people. For us, it's we're really looking for companies to work with who have a professional services culture themselves. As I'm sure everyone can imagine, compared to selling, big fat licenses and lots of hardware up front, there's not as much money sloshing around in a software as a service environment because it's much more affordable for everybody. So for us, we're really looking to work with partners who have a professional services mentality, and that's really exciting for us because that means that we're really forming a real partnership, and most of the exciting revenue, like most of the revenue opportunities that we're seeing out there around products like this, and I think it goes the same for all SaaS products really, is around the premium support and the professional services and implementation. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of color. And thanks as well, Ben, for mentioning that you're interested too. The best thing you could do for the time being is on our website. We've got a partner section and a registration form. So yeah, I'd recommend just filling that in because we aren't dealing with them actively right now, but we are going to be. So if you fill your details in, then we'll certainly have them on record. Now, I've just had a question come in here from Heidi. I'm going to try and unmute you, Heidi, and see if this answer's okay. So Heidi, can you hear us there okay?
Hello?
Hello, excellent. So you've just put through a question which I'll read back, but if you can add something to it, you've imported your company records into AffinityLive, but it doesn't seem to be syncing with the contacts that sends you mail.
Right.
So have you got some emails being synchronized?
Yes, I do. It appears that the emails that are being synchronized are the ones that I have maybe sent mail from AffinityLive to that person. But
Right.
there are contacts that I've checked that are in the AffinityLive database that have emailed me, but they're not coming into AffinityLive. And I wasn't sure they had to be sent from Affinity Mail.
No, they don't. They don't. So, so something's probably a bit mixed up in some configuration values there. We'll take that offline and have a closer look from a debugging point of view. But while I've got everyone, I'll just quickly show you our help website. Now, we just relaunched this help website last week, so we're kind of proud as punch about it. And hopefully you guys can find it beneficial too. Obviously, this isn't a case of pushing people away and saying, hey, don't email support, make sure you use this thing. But what you can do under the setup area here, we've got the automatic email capture link. And we've got a video that describes how it works, but then we've also got configuration details, and we've tried to be very detailed about them because we know this is one of the more tricky kind of features to get right. And what I was saying earlier, if you managed to catch it there, is to use, we strongly recommend using the forwarding method as opposed to the sync method. So there are two methods, sync and forward. We strongly recommend using forward. It's much faster than the sync method, just by the nature of how it works. So the help information's here. You can go to help.affinity.live. Sorry, was that there, David?
That won't create redundant emails?
No, it won't. No, the forward method will not create.
That may be. Do you want me to try switching over to that method? Because I am using the.
That's probably a good idea, Heidi. I'd recommend switching over to the forward, not the sync method. Just had a question here come through from Sean Michelle. Is there any social networking integration in the future for AffinityLive? Great question. So in terms of what we've got right now, we've got Twitter integration built in. So you can come into your account here, click on that integrations tab in the top right, and then you can go through and you can connect your Twitter account, for example. And then what that will do is allow you to, and once you put a Twitter account name or handle against a particular company or client record, then what AffinityLive will do is capture any replies that person sends to you or any direct messages they send to you, and it'll put them in as diary entries and also make them part of your to-do list, so you don't forget to reply or get back to them. And of course, you can send tweets out via the diary entry screen in AffinityLive. That's all we have. Oh, we've also got Yammer in terms of, I don't know if any of you guys are Yammer users, but it's great. So it's worth having a look at too. It's kind of like a private Twitter, and the system can automatically post a Yammer when you connect it to say things like you've just emailed a client with a sales proposal, and just let your colleagues know a bit of a heartbeat or pulse what's going on in the business. In terms of integrations with other things, we're in the early stages of looking at LinkedIn. Well, actually, we're fairly advanced on LinkedIn, and we're at the early stages of looking at Facebook. One of the reasons we haven't prioritized Facebook as yet, even though it's obviously the big gorilla, is the actual business-orientated integrations around Facebook is something that's been a bit of a moving feast over the last little while. So anyone who does want Facebook integration through AffinityLive, we'd really love to talk to you and get a feeling for the use cases of how you would use AffinityLive now, or a product like AffinityLive now with Facebook. We just didn't want to go through the build it and they will come process of assuming that everyone will want to use a CRM in conjunction with their Facebook friends, and then realize that actually no one really wants to do that. It's that's for their personal time as opposed to shrilling. In terms of other questions, Heidi asked a question there, is it possible to send an email to multiple contacts from different companies? Not really at the moment, Heidi. We're going to be changing the way that we choose the people we send emails to inside AffinityLive to give you more of that Google-orientated free text field where you start typing and it does a real-time Ajax lookup to get that information. That's something that's still probably a month or so off. It's one of the things that we know we really need to do, and it's at that point you'll be able to do those sorts of things through the system. When you've got the automatic email capture set up, sometimes it's actually better to do it from your Gmail account, to be honest, and have it captured that way. However, one of the things that's probably worth mentioning briefly is the concept of a contributor. So let's say you're doing a project for Acme Corporation and you've got another contact who's over at Alpha Corp, and you want to be able to include that person from Alpha Corp as someone who helps to deliver the job and get it across the line. What you can do is you can add that person from Alpha Corp as a contributor. So a contributor is a third party, someone who isn't the client, but they're playing a role in helping to get the project delivered. Now, I've got no idea if we've got an Alpha in here. No, we don't. Let's try and find Smith. Hopefully we'll find a Smith. Yes, we do. Excellent. So what we can do is say that these two people here from Naismith's Sons are contributors. So they're playing a part in helping to deliver this job. They might be a third-party advisor, all sorts of things. And then what you can do is when you want to send an email now on this particular job here, you can click on the Send Diary link. And then when you are on that screen, again, I've got a bit of webinar lag here, you can click on the Email tab. Just wait for you to catch up on that end there. Click on the Email tab, and then you can send emails to both the client contact as well as these contributors or third parties. So that's how you're able to bring people together as being seen as if they're part of the same company when really they're not. Okay, we're pretty much out of time. I'm conscious that for most of you it's probably getting into the late afternoon now, and it's probably a beautiful summer's day that you want to get out to. If there are any more questions? Otherwise, we'll wrap things up. And of course, feel free to follow up with emails to support@affinitylive.com. You can use that help section up in the top right-hand side there on any page to hit us up with support and ask questions. And certainly, if you like the look of the product, we're in this public beta phase at the moment where we're really appreciating anyone who is able to share feedback with us as to how this helps or could be improved to help their business. And also, if you love what you see, feel free to share and tell your friends about it. If you're a Google Apps Marketplace user, feel free to pop a review in to the Google Apps Marketplace. They play a really important part to ranking and helping other people discover Affinity Live. And also feel free to tweet. Our Twitter handle is affinity_live. So feel free to sort of spread the word that way. All right, everyone, thanks very much for your time. We'll wrap things up now, and if you've got any more questions, just follow up with us via email directly. And once again, really appreciate you taking the time and trialing Affinity Live.
Thank you.
See you.